and welcome to today's webinar, Energy Security of Central European Countries 1 year after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. My name is Michał Paszkowski, and I'm delighted to moderate this discussion today. The webinar is organized by the Baltic Department of Institute of Central Europe. It is my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speakers, and thank you for accepting the invitation for participating in today's event. So Professor Andrzej Podraza, the head of Department of International and Security Relations from the Social Science Faculty of the John Paul II Catholic University of Lublin. Welcome, Professor. Professor Justyna Misiągiewicz from Department of International Security from the Faculty of Political Science and Journalism of the Marii Curie-Skłodowskiej University. Welcome, Professor. And the last but not least, Eugenia Gusilov, Director of Romania Energy Center. It is an independent organization specializing in international affairs, particularly energy issues. So I think that the energy situation is changing very rapidly, and already more than a year of Russia-Ukraine war has led to numerous changes that affect us all. So I'm glad that we will be able to discuss the impact of the war on the energy security of Central European countries with such distinguished energy experts. So once again, welcome to the webinar, and without further ado, I would like to start with some, I think, more general question prepared. Yes, for this question will be for all speakers, but perhaps maybe at first, Professor Andrzej Podraza, could you please tell us how do you assess the energy security of Central European countries in June 2023? What has the Russian-Ukraine war changed the energy situation, energy dimension since February 2022? So. Professor, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your invitation. Of course, the subject which we are going to deal with today is really immense, and we are going probably to address a number of issues also in further parts of our webinar. So just very briefly, let me start maybe by saying that a lot has changed, and a lot must be changed in the future as well. I mean, our job, or let's say the job of the states or international organization, hasn't been finished. A lot is going to be done in the future. And I think that, and I do hope that we are going to address all these issues also in our further parts. I mean, if we are talking about energy security of Central European countries, we shouldn't forget that we are not living in an island. We are living in Europe. We are confronted with the war in Ukraine, with this Russian aggression against Ukraine, and it's a very important factor which has influenced our energy security. But of course, we must also remember that we should talk in a broader dimension. So we should address not only energy security of Central European countries, but Europe as such. Because we are a part of the European market, we are a part of the European Union. And of course, if we are dealing with energy sources, if we are dealing with energy security, we are, of course, as Poland, as other Central European states, are responsible for our own energy security. But of course, we should cooperate with each other. we should cooperate within the European Union. We should cooperate also with the United States. And that's why we should address this issue not only from the point of view of Central European countries, but Europe as such, the European Union as such. Of course, I mean, the starting point would be to deal with definitions of energy security. I mean, there are a number of different definitions because I mean, these definitions are broader and broader compared to, let's say, past definitions. And if we take into account these broad definitions, of course, our discussions should be much broader than probably we expect to have this discussion. But for example, I mean, if we take into account the International Energy Agency, this agency defines energy security as the uninterrupted availability of energy sources at an affordable price. So, I mean, we have different elements here which are quite important if we are trying to assess our security, our energy security after the breakup of this Russian-Ukrainian war. Of course, if we try to answer this question, and probably I will touch upon a number of questions in my next interventions, we should deal with such problems like supply diversification, and that's a problem which is very, very important, not only just because of the war in Ukraine, because also the first invasion, aggression of Russia against Ukraine in 2014 was a very important event which led to a number of decisions which were taken by Poland, by other countries. Of course, gas storage, if we are talking about gas, because I mean, basically, if we are dealing with energy security, sometimes we mainly touch upon supply of gas, oil, sometimes coal, of course, electricity, and other sources. But I mean, gas is quite important, especially if we take into account policy of the Russian Federation towards the European Union and towards Germany before the invasion. Then, of course, prices. Prices are very important. That's a very important factor which should be also addressed if we are talking about energy security. Then, of course, demand reduction, because it's not only the problem of availability of energy sources, but also how we use these sources for our, let's say, everyday life. I mean, I'm not only talking about individuals, but especially about industry, because that's quite important. So prices, fossil fuel prices, that's a problem which should be also addressed. And demand reduction. And then, of course, energy efficiency, because it's not only a demand reduction, but also efficiency. That's also a problem which is also important. And a lot has been done, but of course, a lot of must be done also in the future. Then, of course, I mean, if we would like to have, you know, a kind of full picture, we should also touch upon renewable energy. That's quite important. I mean, this a transition to so-called clean energy, that's a very important issue, and of course it's connected with policy of the European Union. I mean, that's a problem which is quite important. Then, of course, some future policy prescriptions, considerations, a kind of policy outlook. It's also a problem which should be addressed. And generally speaking, I mean, because I have mentioned a number of problems which should be addressed. Of course, I do hope that we'll address all this issue in further parts of our discussion. But generally speaking, I think that our security, our energy security, if we look from the point of view of Central European countries, but also if you look from the point of view of the European Union as such, of European countries, is in a good situation, let's say, nowadays. I mean, it's the situation is probably better than we expected just after what happened in February 2022. I mean, a lot has been done, especially if we look at such countries like Germany, for example. They've done a kind of a good job, I would say, because I mean they were very dependent on the supply of gas from Russia, and they have tried to be more independent if we are talking about the energy security from Russian influences, and they have done a lot. And also, I mean, if we look at other countries, a lot has been done. If we're talking about our regional cooperation within the region, but also if we're talking about the European Union. But of course, as I have said, I mean, for example, I mean, if we look, for example, at the problem of gas, I mean, for example, if we look at LNG, for example, there are not so many interconnections between states. I'm not talking about Central European states, but for example, if we look at this problem of interconnections between Spain and the rest of Europe, because Spain is a country which has the highest capacity if we are talking about LNG. But I mean, then if there are not so many interconnections between Spain and France, and of course there are some political problems with building these interconnections, then of course that's a kind of example of a problem which should be solved in the future. So generally speaking, concluding my intervention, I would say that we are in a good situation. I mean, we are in a much better situation that we expected in February 2022.
Thank you very much, Professor, and thank you for this broad picture of the problem. And I will agree with you about that. The situation right now is much better than we expected in 2022. So now move on. Maybe Professor Justyna Misiągiewicz, could you tell us what is your perspective, what is your point of view about this? How this war has changed the energy dimension of Central Europe countries?
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its further weaponization of energy resources, we have examples of such weaponization of energy resources, especially as we mention about gas market. The situation on the energy market has worsened considerably. Following its invasion of Ukraine, Russia cut pipeline deliveries of natural gas to the European Union by more than half. So it was a shock for Central European states, which most of those states were addicted to Russian energy for many years. But in the winter, which was gone, the mild winter and lower than expected demand have kept gas inventories relatively stable. So I will be also optimistic that it is not very bad situation since this war started, but the outlook for winter 2023 could be more challenging. So the EU faces a potential shortfall of nearly 30 billion cubic meters of natural gas this year, probably. So paradoxically, Putin motivated European countries to take more action to ensure energy security. For example, we have some projects, we have some interventions. Introduction of minimum gas storage obligations. It's a very important move towards energy security in our region and in European Union as a whole. Other things are, for example, energy diplomacy, because we have to cooperate in producing states in many dimensions, especially in gas. For example, European Commission signed a memorandum of understanding in June 2022 on a strategic partnership in the field of energy with Azerbaijan. I will talk about Azerbaijan later. We have also several interconnectors were commissioned ahead of the 2022 and 2023 heating season that facilitated internal gas flows and the diversification of gas supply. For example, Poland, Lithuania, gas interconnector, or Greece-Bulgaria gas interconnector, which are very important from the perspective of the Central European region. Other important move was the EU platform for the common purchase of gas, LNG and hydrogen. It was a joint EU initiative for every member state. The first round of the tender covers gas from June 2023 to May 2024. So far, 207 companies have applied to participate in this instrument. Undoubtedly, we should mention that in the context of the turbulence and uncertainty in the energy market, as a consequence, of course, of the war in Ukraine, it is a securitization of energy, energy. So the theory of risk is also very important and appropriate in this analysis. The risk of severing energy cooperation between European countries and Russia in the face of the war in Ukraine may cause a serious economic crisis. It's a destructive aspect, very pessimistic. But at the same time, on the other hand, it may influence the emergence of alternative opportunities connected with energy savings, connected with using renewables, and the perspective of improvement in energy security systems is a constructive aspect. As a consequence, paradoxically, Russia and Russian invasion may speed up the implementation of the EU's plan to reduce dependence on non-renewable resources and motivate member states to pursue a more differentiated energy security policy. It may be an optimistic conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for your insights. Last but not least, Eugenia, could you tell us about your point of view, Romania also points of view about, what has the Russian-Ukraine war changed the energy situation in Central European countries?
Hello, Michał. Thank you for convening all of us. I salute my co-panelists as well. I would say that in Romania's case, but not only, in Europe's case in general, this terrible, terrible tragedy that is happening and has been happening for a year and a half already in our region has done one big favor to all of the EU member states, in the sense that it finally forced us to do all the things that we were delaying, reluctant to put in practice. We're saying, no, it was impossible to do this, to give up coal, renewables too expensive. Now we can no longer have this argument that it's expensive, we don't have the money, because Romania is now awash with cash. There is so much money to be absorbed and project to implement that my fear and my concern is actually that if we are not able to attract all of this money, a certain portion of it will be decommitted, because last time I checked, for instance, our absorption rate for 2014-2020 classical EU funds was only 70%. So right now our problem is not the lack of money for green projects, but the lack of administrative capacity to kind of process all these applications and to make these projects happen in the amount of time that we have at our disposal. So disbursing the money that the EU has given Romania is our #1 priority. And when I criticize Romania's lack of administrative capacity, I refer to the fact that they announce very short periods for submitting projects, 3 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, and then they sit on these project applications for 10 months, 1 year. And we still don't have the results of some of these call for projects. Maybe we'll see them in June. On the plus side, I would like to mention that if Romania was talking about in its National Energy and Climate Plan, so the initial version, 2020, about 6.9 gigawatts of renewable by 2030, now because of all this funding injection that we're seeing, the government and the ministry is saying at least 10 gigawatts of renewable energy projects by 2027, which means that we will significantly overshoot the initial target that we had, 30.7 renewable energy in final consumption. Now they're saying we will have 38% instead of 30.7, and not by 2030, but by 2027, because all this is related to money coming through the modernization fund, through the National Recovery and Resilience Facility. So these are the kind of problems we have right now, being able to take all this money, put these projects in place, and there are even about 16 gigawatts, so new gigawatts of renewable projects in various stages of authorization in Romania. So that's according to the TSO. So exciting stuff, new things, finally developments after we've seen so much well, after we've seen in Romania a pause being hit for many, many years, starting from 2016, so 2017 until 2020-21, no new renewable projects were brought online. So now this is finally being unclogged, things will happen, and this is all thanks to this terrible war, because if it wasn't for this war, things in Romania wouldn't have moved at such a speed. Romania wouldn't have embraced coal phase out and so on and so forth. Finally, we're seeing the phenomenon of prosumers taking off. 5 years ago, we had none, not one prosumer connected to the grid. And now this is the fastest growing segment in Romania. We had about 430 megawatts aggregate megawatts installed in the prosumer area by the end of 2022, 535 megawatts by the end of February, at the end of May, 660 megawatts. So until the big projects are coming online, we're seeing the capacity addition happening actually in the prosumer area. So that's a good thing. And that means that finally households, small and medium enterprises have heard and they got tired of waiting for the government to do things for them, and many people have paid even out of their pocket to install solar PVs and to upgrade and become more autonomous. Sometimes these capacity additions, like in January, February, March this year, happened even outside the call for projects, which is through this official subsidized program that we have for installing photovoltaics in the residential but also commercial area. Finally, what we're seeing in Romania for the first time ever, and this is huge, negative prices for electricity on the day-ahead market. This has never happened before, never. So if last year we were seeing peak prices and we were talking about how we do not have enough installed capacity, then the demand contracted, and now we are having actually now excess capacity because industrial consumption contracted, residential consumption contracted, public lighting went down by almost 30%. So now we are kind of exporting electricity. So this is new and this is exciting, and this is, let's say, a first time for Romania, these negative prices. Then we're seeing storage projects coming online. We have not had any storage projects, but now we finally have one. This is the modest beginning, one storage project injecting into the grid, and have others announced to be connected in June, in September, let's say more powerful storage projects, but again, new developments. We have exciting new things happening in the small modular reactor area, in the sense that money is being given, and this project in Romania that we have at Doicești on the site of a former coal-fired power plant, which was retired. Now they want to build there a small modular reactor power plant. It is part of this global infrastructure partnership of the G7 and the US administration, and it is receiving money for the first stage of the front-end engineering design, second stage of front-end engineering design. Countries are giving money, and not only the United States, the United Arab Emirates, South Korea. So exciting new things are happening, because this would be the first of a kind project in the world and in Europe. And it's progressing at a rather good pace, I would say. And things seem to be aligned for this to happen even maybe much faster than Romania adding a classical nuclear reactor, Chernobyl, unit 3 and 4. I think the SMR thing will happen much faster. So yes, we have been shocked, but it has shocked us out of inertia. And we have finally in Europe and in Romania have found the will, the political will to start moving faster, and the speed doubled, tripled towards the alternatives. So things have been, how should I say this, bogged down for a couple of years, but now they are picking up space, and I'm excited and optimistic to see this happen.
Thank you for your perspective and for Romanian perspective, and I hope that some of the topics will also discuss further. So I would like to talk more deeply right now about some other, of course, energy issues, and I would like to give the floor to Professor Andrzej Podraza, and I would like to ask you, how has the Russian-Ukraine war affected the energy, I could say, policy of Central European countries, and has the war, I could say, the strength in regional energy cooperation in your opinion? So, Professor, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for these interesting questions. As I have said recently, we should probably start our discussion not only concentrating on 2022, I mean, on the Russian aggression against Ukraine in 2022, but we should probably start in 2014, because policies, especially if we look at the policies of Poland, energy policy of Poland, it changed a lot after the first aggression of Russia against Ukraine. Of course, I mean, new signs could be also spotted before 2014, because Poland regarded Russia as a country which tried to use energy resources to gain political aims. So our policy, generally speaking, I'm not talking about the whole period of the 20th century, but I mean, especially if we look at events just prior to 2014, our energy policy started to change even before the first aggression of Russia against Ukraine. So we should probably start to discuss this problem by referring to all actions and decisions which were taken in 2014 and after 2014. But of course, we should also, if we are talking about Central European countries, we should also include Germany. Because we cannot forget about Germany, because if we look at from the point of view of Europe's economic future, of course, in connection to energy, Europe's economic future is dependent on energy security of Central European countries and Germany especially. Of course, I'm not going to discuss the size of German economy and its impact on the economy of whole Europe, but we must remember that, of course, even nowadays, without these connections, generally speaking, of course, because they exist now, even nowadays. But I mean, if we even forget about all these connections with all these pipelines connecting Germany with Russia, we must remember that Germany is still a kind of European gas hub. Because there is a kind of flow of gas from Belgium, from the Netherlands, if we are talking about LNG, through Germany to other parts of Europe. So Germany is quite crucial, and a kind of cooperation between Germany and Central European countries, especially if we also look at potential of Ukraine. And of course, Poland has the longest border with Ukraine. So, of course, I mean, this part of Europe is quite crucial, is quite important if we are talking about energy security and Europe's economic development, economic future. Of course, if we try to analyze Germany's energy policy in the past, and if we try to compare it with the Polish approach, of course, these two policies were quite different, because generally speaking, Germany look at Russia, look at cooperation, energy cooperation with Russia from the economic point of view. They just didn't take into account all these problems which could arise if we are talking about this policy. I mean, the policy of Russian Federation, towards the rest of Europe. Of course, we know what Russia wanted to achieve. Well, of course, we can mention not only the Falin-Kwieciński doctrine, which was the doctrine which was adopted during, I mean, at the end of the Soviet Union, but of course, this doctrine was especially, let's say, praised by Vladimir Putin. He used this doctrine for achieving political aims in relations with Ukraine, with Germany, and of course, there was a kind of blind policy of Germany towards Russia, which of course had a very bad impact on safeguarding energy security of Europe as such. But of course, and of course, I mean, there are a number of elements which probably should be addressed to answer the question about Central European countries and Germany if we are talking about energy security. But of course, we do not have time to do it. Of course, we know that it's a very important country with the biggest economy, and of course, the economic development of the European Union and of all European states is mostly dependent on what's going on in Germany. Of course, if we look at cooperation among Central European countries with this look, I mean, with this wider look at what's going on in Europe, we should especially try to address the problem of diversification of energy sources, because after 2014, it was understood, of course, not in all Central European countries. We must remember that even nowadays we have differences between Central European countries. I mean, if we take into account Hungary and its policy towards Russia, also if we are talking about energy. But generally speaking, in the past, we had different groups of Central European countries which developed, let's say, hawkish policy like Poland or the Baltic states. Some countries were more pragmatic towards Russia, like Slovakia, or even some countries were pro-Russian, like Hungary, like even the Czech Republic, especially if we take into account President Zeman. So there were differences in the approach towards Russia. But after, of course, this invasion of February 2022, if we are talking about energy security, this approach is quite similar, maybe with the exception of Hungary. Generally speaking, these countries, and I would like to mention especially Poland, these countries, because Poland wanted to achieve this goal even before 2022, these countries want to reduce, and they are quite successful, especially if we're talking about Poland, to reduce their reliance on Russian energy sources, especially if we are talking about gas, by attracting especially LNG from other countries, from other places like the United States, like the Gulf countries, and so on. If we look at the initiatives of the Polish government to date, and we analyze the period from 2014, of course, we can mention a number of different initiatives which were developed and are still developed nowadays, like the construction of a Baltic pipe. Of course, it's finished, like the expansion of the gas terminal in Świnoujście, like investment in a floating gas terminal in the Gulf of Gdańsk, and that's quite important, like a construction of gas interconnectors with Lithuania, with Slovakia, with the Czech Republic. I mean, this kind of network is quite important because, I mean, Poland, if we look even at documents, Poland wanted to be a gas hub for Central European countries, especially if we take into account the 3 Seas initiatives. Then, of course, if we look from the Polish point of view, a very important initiative is connected with a construction in the future of nuclear power plants, not only, I mean, big power plants, but also small nuclear reactors. Of course, I have mentioned that before. A kind of, I mean, the deepening of cooperation with countries like the United States, like the Gulf countries, if we are talking about attracting energy sources there, especially if we are talking about oil and LNG, because that's quite important. Of course, the development of regional energy infrastructure, if we are talking about Central European countries, is very, very important, and strengthening this kind of cooperation. Also, if we look to the future, because if we look to the future, and we will address this issue as well today, if we look to the future, we must remember that if we are interconnected, if we are talking about the European market, if we are talking about Central European countries, and then if we are also quite well connected with Ukraine, then there is a kind of future for Europe and for Central European countries, because Ukraine is not only an agriculture country which can supply wheat and other agriculture goods, but also, I mean, it has very huge capacities, energy capacities, which can be used to safeguard European energy security. So that's quite briefly, because I mean there are so many different problems that should be addressed, but I just want to give floor for our members of the panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor, for your insights, and thank you for also addressing this German topic. Of course, energy policy of this country has affected the policy of Poland, but also the other Central European countries. And now, maybe Professor Misiągiewicz, I have a question to you about, in your opinion, how will energy cooperation in the region evolve, given the efforts of Central Europe countries to import natural gas from Azerbaijan? And what role can play, for example, Turkey, which has very ambitious, ambitions to build a regional gas hub? So, what is your point of view about these issues?
Yes, it's very interesting, especially when the security architecture is changing a little bit. It is connected also with the war in Ukraine. And the role of the Caspian region is changing. Maybe in the future, the development of the Caspian resources will be much more intensive, and the European Union will be much more interested in energy security infrastructure projects connected with Azerbaijan. And not only Azerbaijan, because it is not enough gas in Azerbaijan to fill the security needs of the European states, but also Turkmenistan. It's another state. It's very interesting partner, a potential partner for the European Union, but nowadays it is very difficult, because not only because of the conflict between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan connected with the access to the oil fields in the middle of the Caspian Sea, but also the role of China in the Caspian region and the role of China in Turkmenistan. It could be difficult to get gas from Turkmenistan through the Caspian region and to the European Union. The role of Turkey nowadays it's a Turkey. It's very important in this dimension, because not only because of the elections. Recep Tayyip Erdogan probably will not change its policy towards Russia, because Russia is very strong in Turkey, especially in the energy dimension. We we have Turkish stream, we have blue stream, so the Russian gas is going through Turkey without any problems. It's a problem for the Western world, but I don't think it's a problem for Turkey. What about the importance of Turkish, the importance of Turkey on the energy security system? First of all, the geopolitical position of Turkey is very interesting, and it is very important in the energy, geo-energetic dimension of the international relations. First of all, we should think about Turkey as an energy hub, because it's a concept not only European, but most Russian. Russians wanted Turkey to be an energy hub, especially in the context of the Turk Stream pipeline. However, gas hub must have highly diversified supplies. That's why Turkey has decided to invest in LNG regasification terminals, 4 of which have been built in recent years. So they are good in LNG business. Second of all, Turkey supports the agreement between Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan, because it is good for Turkey to be much more important transit state and energy hub. And without Turkmenistan, it will be probably impossible. And Turkey should increase its storage capacity, definitely. Turkish Stream, it's a very interesting energy security system. The pipeline is completed. The onshore part of the pipe runs to the Turkish-Bulgarian border. From there, gas is exported to Bulgaria and North Macedonia. Both branches of the gas pipeline is to be about 63 billion cubic meters. Russia has also proposed the creation of a gas hub in Turkey, without, however, specifying what would be consist of. But it is a very controversial problem for Turkey, for NATO, for United States, for European Union also. Turkey's aspirations are consistent with the expectation of Russia, which counts on closer cooperation, proposing to jointly shape energy routes to the Central Europe. So it's a common interest of Russia and Turkey. The Balkan stream runs through the territory of Bulgaria and Serbia and Hungary, and it is connected with the Turkish stream infrastructure. In this context, the cooperation between Azerbaijan and Turkey is very important. So now I cannot see the cooperation between Central European states in developing the Caspian region, but I can see the cooperation between Azerbaijan and Turkey. Azerbaijan became very important for Western markets since 1994. Since the contract of the century, which was signed on the basis of which international corporations gained access to the energy market of this country. The crisis in relations between Russia and European Union in the context of conflict in eastern Ukraine in 2014 meant that the mega energy project, the southern gas corridor, has become close to implementation. But this project was mostly the project between Turkey and Azerbaijan, and European Union was a supporter, but not very influential supporter of this pipeline. Nowadays, it is expected that European Union and Central European states will be much more interested in developing this pipeline, this infrastructure. So it is connected with, of course, the gas market in Central Europe and the need to diversify gas supply sources connected with unstable energy market. The corridor may diversify gas supplies to Greece and Bulgaria. It should be noted that without the Trans-Caspian gas pipeline project, the planned full southern gas corridor would be not possible to be reliable source of gas for European Union. And we have two phases, phases of realization of this project. The first one is the Turkish element of the pipeline system, the Trans-Anatolian energy system and Trans-Adriatic pipeline, gas pipelines. And the second element is the Trans-Balkan pipeline to Ukraine and to Austria. The remaining amount of gas can flow through the Bulgarian, Romanian, Hungarian, Austrian pipeline. From the beginning of the 2021, Bulgaria began to receive gas from Azerbaijan. It can be concluded that Turkey is playing on two fronts in European energy market in terms of gas supplies because of the Turkish stream, which is connected with Russia, and pipelines connected with Azerbaijan, avoiding Russia. So Turkey is indispensable element of the transit of gas and oil also because we have BTC oil pipeline in the Caspian region. What about the conclusion? I said that I cannot see the cooperation between Central Europe in the case of developing the Caspian region. I think that most of the infrastructure projects are connected with Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Russia, of course. Both countries, Azerbaijan and Turkey, impose rules on the redistribution of gas directed to the European Union. So more Azerbaijan and Turkey, less European Union, but in the future it could be changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I have some technical problems, but nevertheless, thank you, Professor, for your insights. And Now, maybe Eugenia, I will have the question for you. How, from a Romanian point of view, Russia's role in Central Europe has changed? What is perception of this country from the energy policy point of view of Romania?
Yes, well, this conflict, Russia's war against Ukraine, ripped the bandage off. And made us all rethink energy security in a different light. Now, we are not coming, or the things that we have done last year were not done on, let's say, empty ground and on an empty field. The EU has worked and has done a lot of work, and with a different track record in different countries, in the sense of putting in place those interconnectors, especially gas interconnectors. To make this region of ours more integrated. And yes, they have moved in some cases at a slower speed, but many of them are finally there in place. So this whole crisis caught us not quite so unprepared as we could have been, because a lot of work has already gone into integrating, in terms of infrastructure, our region, but it has accelerated the speed of developments. Now, the sense in terms of natural gas, because Romania has some of its own domestic gas reserves. It has some very good prospects in the Black Sea or onshore as well. It has initially one calendar in mind, so we wanted to put those reserves into production in 2018. This didn't happen according to plan. We dragged on with this Black Sea gas production, and it is yet not producing. Now, what has happened in the meantime? And I will relate here to some things that Mrs. Misiągiewicz said with the Turkish Stream. So initially it was, you remember, South Stream. Indeed, the initial design, 63 billion cubic meters. Then this project unraveled very abruptly in 2014. Was ended, and then a new one appeared in its place called Turkish Stream, of which they, by the way, built only 2 lines. So the first line of 16 BCM feeding into the Turkish market, and the second line into the Southeastern European market. And in this case, because the Southeastern European gas market is rather small, you don't compete for a lot. In size, it's about 20-25 billion cubic meters. And, since Romania had this plan that we will start our own gas production, our sense in 2019, 2020, 2021 was that Russia ate our lunch. Because we didn't yet manage to produce this gas, which we wanted to send further to Hungary and to Austria. And then Russia was so quick in putting in place the second Turkish Stream line and basically taking market share and occupying market share that some in Romania, especially the companies, were dreaming that would be theirs, right? If Romania would have stuck to the initial plan and would have put those Black Sea reserves into production in 2018. Well, regardless, everything that has happened last year gives us in Romania a second chance because suddenly Russia, if we talk about oil, those barrels are toxic. We need to replace them. We have replaced them with barrels, kosher barrels from other countries from which it is okay to buy. Now, in terms of natural gas, we don't have sanctions per se. What has happened here in the natural gas sphere is that Russia destroyed its own market, starting with the cutting of volumes that it was supplying through the gas pipelines that it has built, specifically Nord Stream, and stopping them to the point of stopping those flows altogether in September of last year. Now I'm concerned because now they say they want to start some maintenance schedule for Turkish Stream, and this is exactly how it started in June 2022 when they said we'll put Nord Stream on some it will enter a scheduled maintenance. So we'll see what will happen next. But the point of the matter is that there are no European sanctions in the area of gas or nuclear for now. And here it is Russia itself that destroyed its cash revenues that were coming from Europe. Now, this gives Romania a second chance, a chance that we did not hope for, in the sense that if we move, properly, at a proper speed, we may see this natural gas production in 3 or 4 years' time, if pending, this final investment decision that we might see announced this year. So June, July, maybe this summer. That's what I'm expecting. So if Romania plays its cards well this time, it may become the energy supplier and gas contributor to the region that it could have been and played this role even a couple of years ago. Now, what this crisis has created, it has created a historic chance and opportunity for us to finally start using this Trans-Balkan pipeline in reverse. And we have seen the first experiments, flows coming through Bulgaria, through Romania, to Moldova last winter, which is good. I hope this continues. But, there was this memorandum of understanding signed recently between Romania and Moldova, in which they tried to kind of frame their energy cooperation in new terms and try to identify new projects that they would like to focus on in the next years. And one interesting thing in this memorandum of understanding is that they want to work on ensuring bidirectional capacity for natural gas pipelines. So if we were talking beforehand with building this Iași-Ungheni pipeline, bringing natural gas, Romanian natural gas to Moldova, now they're talking about bidirectional, so from Moldova to Romania. And at first I couldn't understand why at this point in time they're talking about this bidirectional flow. So what gas does Moldova have to send off to Romania? And then it hit me. It's not about that. It's about using Ukraine's underground gas storage facility. It's about satisfying Turkey's dream projection, what Justyna was talking about, of becoming an energy hub and being able for the traders to buy LNG, to buy Russian gas, and then store it probably in Ukraine's underground gas storage capacity, and then pumping it back through Moldova, through Romania, into whatever Southeastern European countries it is needed. So that's why they're talking about this bidirectional capacity between Romania and Moldova, because they want to add Ukraine's underground gas storage capacity to the European one, to actually start using it. Because as you know, these facilities, underground gas storage facilities, are located in Western Ukraine. So they are not in the area where active hostilities and conflicts, the war is going on. That would add, what, 1/3 to Europe's underground gas storage capacity, which is currently about 100 billion cubic meters. Ukraine is 32, 33. So that means about 130 billion cubic meters of underground gas capacity of the integrated EU plus Ukraine energy market. So things are moving in this direction. So and new things are happening quite fast, which I would say is a direct result of this war, which acted as a cold shower for all of us, for Germany included, because Germany was sleepwalking into this total dependency on Russia in terms of energy. And then suddenly, when the war happened, we see that Germany can indeed build an LNG import gas terminal in 10 months. So suddenly, our future is conceivable without Russian oil and without Russian gas. We can visualize this now. This is no longer, like a rosy dream. You would be dismissed a couple of years back if you would dare to say that we don't need that much Russian hydrocarbons. And here, Poland, more than Romania, I would say, because Romania has this tendency to be self-sufficient. We rely on our good legacy, but Poland and the Baltic states have really provided the drive to cut our dependency from Russia, and we're early in these discussions and in taking action, and finally managed to do so last year. It was clearly shown that the position in which Poland and the Baltic states found themselves last year was possible because they started working in that direction earlier than the rest of us in Europe, especially those who have some domestic natural gas and oil reserves.
Thank you very much for your insights. Especially you you said about Ukraine. Ukraine has the world's largest underground natural gas storage capacity. Sorry, in Europe. So, moving on, I would like to actually ask the final question to Professor Podraza on the Ukraine topic. So, from your point of view, can Ukraine play an important role on the energy map of Europe after the war, and also ensuring the energy security of Central European countries? So, what is your point of view?
Yes, of course it can. I mean, Ukraine can play a very important role on the energy map of Europe in the future. But of course, everything depends, maybe not everything, but a lot depends on the war. I mean, we are not really certain when it is going to finish. And I mean, what does it mean to finish this war? I mean, that's the whole problem. Of course, if this war is not finished, then of course Ukraine's role is going to be important, but I mean not as important as in peaceful time. For example, I mean, if we look at Ukraine's natural gas production, most of the sites where it is produced are in a control of the Ukrainian government, but they are really close to the fighting. I mean, some production sites are less than 50 kilometers from the fighting, because they are located, mostly they are located in the northeast of the country, in the Poltava and Kharkiv regions. Of course, I mean, if they are located in the western part of Ukraine, that's not a problem, generally speaking. I mean, I'm talking about, for example, about these sites located near Lviv. I mean, that's a problem which we can't really address at the moment. But generally speaking, I mean, if we are looking at the potential of Ukraine, I mean, it's really huge. I mean, sometimes it is even said that Ukraine could become the next European energy powerhouse, because it has enough natural gas reserves to replace Russian exports to Europe. Of course, we must also remember that Ukraine, even without Crimea, because I mean there are some sites which could be located there near the Crimea. Of course, I mean, for obvious reasons, I mean, gas cannot be cannot be used from this part of Ukraine. But I mean, even without Crimea, Ukraine can easily double or even triple the production of natural gas. So I mean, that's a very good news for Europe, for Central European countries. But of course, if we would like to use undersea gas potential in the Black Sea of Crimea, then we must have the war finished. And of course, I mean, it must be a kind of cooperation between Western companies and Ukraine, because big investment is really needed to use these enormous deposits. I mean, in the Black Sea. But of course, I'm not only talking about gas, but we must also remember that Ukraine has enormous potential in hydrogen and renewable energy, and that's also important if we are taking into account all the changes which have been made by the European Union. Even before the war in 2020, the European Union recognized Ukraine as the priority partner for the hydrogen strategy for a climate neutral Europe by 2050. Because I mean, there is a huge potential Of course, if this cooperation is going to be developed in the future, that's of course it's really important not only for Ukraine as such, but for the European Union and for Central European countries. Of course, if we look at cooperation in the area of hydrogen, we should not only look from the point of view of the European Union, but also from the point of view of Germany, because Germany is quite active in this area. Germany presented its hydrogen strategy even before this strategy, which was adopted by the European Union. It develops a kind of hydrogen diplomacy, and not only countries like Nigeria, but also Ukraine is really important in this strategy. There are, of course, some agreements which were signed by German companies with Ukraine in the area of hydrogen. So that's an area which is really important if we are talking about European energy security. Of course, if we are talking about hydrogen, we look from the Polish point of view, we must remember that Poland would be then a transit country, which is also important, like we are a transit country if we are talking about gas. So we should be a part of this kind of cooperation between Germany and Ukraine, and between the European Union in general and Ukraine. Then, of course, storage was mentioned. Ukrainian natural gas storage capacity was mentioned, and it's also very important because it's the biggest storage in Europe, and that's quite important. And of course, if we are looking at Ukraine, I mean, they are doing a very good job nowadays, but also before the war, if we are talking about adopting European legislation. If we are talking about storage capacities, if we are talking about other areas which are important in the field of energy cooperation, and that's quite important, because not only they have a kind of potential, a very huge potential, but of course they are also doing a lot if we are talking about adopting European legislation in the fields of energy. And maybe as a last remark, I would also mention that they have, due to the climate, they have a very big potential if we are talking about renewable sources. If we are talking about possibilities of developing projects in the area of wind and solar projects. So that's also important, because that's in line with climate policy of the European Union. So generally speaking, we must remember that Ukraine has a huge potential in terms of energy, not only if we are talking about gas, which is very important, but also if we look at the future of our cooperation with Ukraine, if we are talking about hydrogen, if we are talking about renewable resources, that's quite important. So if Ukraine if Ukraine becomes a member state of the European Union, and probably it will become one day. But also without membership, Ukraine is a very good partner for Poland, for Central European countries, and also for the European Union if we are talking about energy security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for your insights. We hope that the Ukraine can play an important role in energy also to the transition, especially in the this hydrogen policy. And finally, I have a question to Professor Misiągiewicz. What do you think? What role can Poland play in ensuring energy security of Central Europe? What is your point of view on this?
Thank you. Vladimir Putin forced us to be much more active than ever, as we said at the beginning of this webinar. And Poland has demonstrated clear leadership on energy security since well before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The government has been actively working to reduce the reliance of natural gas from Russia for many years, so it is optimistic. For example, the share of gas imports from Russia, it was 90% in 2010 and 55% in 2021. So it's a good, I think it's good for our energy security in the future. And that's why Poland is now relatively well placed to deal with the unilateral decision made by Russia last year to cut energy supplies. The most important element of our policy is, of course, the infrastructure. As previously Professor Andrzej Podraza mentioned about the elements of the energy security system of Poland. Of course, the nuclear power program is very important nowadays. It is foreseen that the nuclear energy could account for up to 16% of power generation in the future. So it's an optimistic foreseen. Poland has also 6 high voltage alternating current AC interconnections that link it to the Czech Republic, Germany, the Slovak Republic and Ukraine, of course. And we have 2 high voltage direct current DC interconnection capacity to Lithuania and Sweden. So the only planned new interconnection is the so-called Harmony link DC undersea cable to Lithuania. In June 2021, Poland and Lithuania reached a final investment decision about it. The Harmony link is part of an ongoing project to fully integrate the Baltic states into the European electricity system, and it is expected to be completed in 2025. Of course, Poland has plans to significantly expand gas import, transmission, distribution, regasification, and storage capacity. So in this context, in the future, nowadays, I think it's not possible, we could play a role of transit hub or energy hub in this central region. As part of north-south corridor running through Poland, the Czech Republic, the Slovak Republic, and Hungary to a new LNG terminal in Croatia. Poland's only LNG terminal, Professor Podraza mentioned about Świnoujście. LNG terminal is a very important element of our diversification policy, and its capacity will increase in the future to over 8 billion cubic meters. of gas. And of course, the floating LNG terminal in Gdańsk Bay. It is a plan of gas system with a capacity over 6 billion cubic meters, maybe in 2028. Of course, Baltic pipe is a very important element of our energy security, which will add 10 billion cubic meters of gas. We have also gas interconnection Poland-Lithuania. We have Poland-Slovak Republic gas interconnector. It's also very important in this region. And of course, we have the Naftoport oil terminal located in Gdańsk. It's Poland's only major oil port. The port can receive very large crude carriers with a maximum weight of 2.3 million barrels. The government also is analyzing the extension of the Central Europe pipeline system. It is a very interesting system to Poland and other Baltic states. It is Europe's largest oil product pipeline network covering Belgium, France, Germany, and the Netherlands. The Central Europe pipeline system is the largest of the NATO pipeline systems. It is designed and managed to meet operational requirements in Central Europe in peace, crisis, and conflict. It is connected with NATO policy. So it serves primarily to secure deliveries of fuels to NATO military bases, but it is also delivering commercial fuels. So Poland is making significant infrastructure investments to increase energy security with a focus on diversification away from reliance on imports from Russia. I think we are very successful in that. Poland has great potential to strengthen energy security in Central Europe in that context. At the same time, it should be emphasized that this requires the expansion of the existing energy infrastructure, the construction of new international interconnectors, and the acceleration of the energy transformation of the state's energy system. So we should do more, but the perspective is optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor, for your perspective. And finally, I would like to give the floor to Director Eugenia Gusilov, and also, talking about Poland, because from your point of view, how Poland's activities are assessed in Romania, and can Poland play a greater role in ensuring energy security of this region? And what is your point of view on this?
I like your question. I like your question because whether you are aware of it in Poland or not, Romania always looks over its shoulder to see what is Poland doing in this or that field, So it's always in terms of comparison to see what colleagues in Poland are doing in energy, in transport, in railway infrastructure. With that in mind, because we're always looking at Poland and have a tendency to compare ourselves with Poland or to compete for, American investments or defense investments and so on and so forth. But I would say that if we talk about, let's say, Romania's energy policy, I would label it as opportunistic lately, because irrespective of what they will put on paper in terms of strategic projects, what matters is those projects that will be materialized. And those are the projects which can access funding. And in this area, it's the rules and the available funding from the EU that will move forward certain projects, and is what matters more, I would say, than what the Romanian government will put on the list of its most important things. Because what is the tendency of my government is that they do not always like to engage in this prioritizing or priority setting. So they will just take the projects that were important 20 years ago or 10 years ago and just add to this list, but without a priority, let's say, exercise to it. So what will decide how things will happen on the ground will be the availability of funds from the European Union first and foremost. Then I would like to say that what's the potential for cooperation, or how are the actions of Poland perceived in Romania? And maybe I will say some things that are not politically correct, but for the sake of analysis, I don't think that nice words will help us. So I'd better say it how I see it. Poland has done a tremendous job and has been extremely active since the start of this war in Ukraine in explaining and selling the right perspective to the Romanian policymakers and decision makers and politicians, because truth be told, our optics was not right from the very beginning of this conflict. And I have witnessed this many times in Romania as, let's say, people from Poland in different capacity, making the argument for what's the right position or attitude towards Ukraine and trying to bring Romania into the fold and convince it of the fact that we need to start talking about reconstruction now. Why now? Because it's too early, you know, according to some points of view, or the prevalent view in Romania is that this war is not entirely ours at the beginning, especially. So this has nothing to do with us. So why should we care? So that was at first. Now it's more towards the official line of NATO and the EU, but still sentiments that have to do with this initial assessment still prevail in some areas and in some segments of society. So from this point of view, I think Poland has provided the leadership which Romania has lacked in terms of positioning itself on the right side of history when it comes to Russia's attack against Ukraine. Now, in terms of investments and what we can do together, you know, that Poland continues to play this leadership role and kind of brings Romania and co-opts Romania and various initiatives like the 3 Cs initiative, which is Poland's vision. It's not Romania's vision, but Romania plays along. Romania is part of this format mechanism. And as long as some investments could materialize through the investment fund of this 3 Cs initiative mechanism, I think Romania will play along, and there is potential to cooperate with Romania on that area. I think where we can, let's say, maybe take inspiration from Poland is the way that in how you did not set your too ambitious targets for yourself for renewable, let's say, for PV, solar PV capacity. And despite that, you have installed 5 gigawatts of PV capacity in Poland in the last 2-3 years. So huge development, but not something that you committed in terms of policy. It's, again, the EU policy that drove that. What I think in terms of natural gas, Romania is in this, I would say, bubble of its own in the way it sees things. And here, I think maybe the potential for cooperation is not that great. I think that where Romania could do more is focusing on making this trilateral format in terms of gas with Ukraine and Moldova work more. But in terms of where we could do things together is also in what Professor Podraza was saying, hydrogen. And Poland has moved excellently in terms of policy planning and setting priorities and targets for hydrogen use in mobility, in transport sector. So I think here too, Romania could learn from the Polish example, but also maybe cooperate, and there may be some space for potential cooperation. But again, the initiative would have to come from Polish companies because there is zero experience in using hydrogen in mobility, and things are much more advanced on paper. And on those projects that I have seen, Poland already is thinking about how to develop hydrogen ecosystems in mobility, not only in Poland, but Slovakia, Czech Republic. So 3 countries at the same time. So I think here is an area where also things could work. But again, the initiative will have to come from Poland because Romania lacks this initiative. And as long as we understand that and Poland is more active, I think some things could be done and some cooperation could be fruitful in this area. But you would have to be the locomotive of this.
Thank you for your perspective and also your positive evaluation of the actions taken by Poland. Unfortunately, it is time to finish our interesting discussions. So once again, thank you to our great panelists, Professor Andrzej Podraza. Thank you, Professor. Professor Justyna Misiągiewicz. Thank you, Professor, and the Director Eugenia Gusilov. Eugenia, thank you very much. And also thank you, Andrzej Koma from Institute of Central Europe for technical support in making this webinar possible. So once again, thank you for joining us today, and I wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.